Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Mind Sculptors podcast. I am your host, Spleenface, and today I am joined by guests Fenix.
Hello.
Scotty.
Hi, I'm Scoots. I'll be playing the role of No 03 for this podcast.
And Ian.
Hello, hello.
We have a great show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about the Major League Commander draft that happened just last weekend. But before we get into it, I just want to thank you for joining us. And if you like this episode or any of our other episodes, please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. If you want access to our Discord server as well as some extra content, make sure to head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/themindsculptors or check out the link in the description. All right, so the draft. We're going to start by covering each of our drafts and how we, felt about them, and then we're going to sort of look more generally at the draft as a whole, and talk about some decks and interesting picks and patterns and things like that. So I guess the first topic we have here is about preparation. Let's start with Ian. What did you do to get yourself ready for this draft?
Yeah, so I stressed about it for like 3 days, but I don't think that's the part people want to hear. The thing I really tried to focus on when preparing for my draft was prioritizing like what decks on the database would be the most efficient for me. And there was a couple of factors that went into that. A lot of them were the outdated rule, which for those who are unfamiliar with that rule is any deck that hadn't been edited within the past 3 months was considered outdated. So apart from the 5 switches that we are normally allowed for any of the database decks, an outdated list could have any number of swaps for card slots. So for me, getting decks of that capacity was a bit of a priority because, you can always fix the mana base to how your play style is. You can work on building the central part of the deck. So finding out decks like that, finding out what to prioritize. I know I was 22nd in the draft order. So for me, I knew I wasn't getting Blue Farm. I wasn't getting Roger Silas. I wasn't getting Najeela, decks like that. So anticipating what people would be drafting and what I considered tier 1 options that aren't instinctual tier 1 options, and sort of compiling all of these assets and sort of data points into one spreadsheet that I made for myself with about 20 to 30 decks on it.
Well, a spreadsheet with 20 to 30 decks is certainly a little more prep than I put into it. It's interesting, you mentioned that at pick 22, you were sort of not expecting to maybe have your overall first choice left to you.
Right.
But Scotty, you were picking pretty early, right?
Yes, yeah, I picked number 10.
And apart from, did you have a strategy for that pick and for your other picks?
The only strategy that I had for pretty much any of my picks was my pick in round 1. Because I respect both you and Lurker as players, and I think Razakats is it, if not your best deck between the two of you, one of the ones that you're better at. And so, due to my position in the draft, I just wanted to nab that right away. It's a deck that I've played for a long time and I'm comfortable with, but there was an element of hate drafting going on.
Right.
And yeah.
And for people who don't know,
that,
sorry, I was to say, for people who don't know, you, Spleen, Lurker, and I are all in the same conference, so we'll be playing a lot together.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll be playing against each other. So that was basically my main motivation. And for every other pick, I picked a bunch of shiny D6s out of my bag, and then made my pools of decks and rolled a dice when it came to my turn, and I did great.
Yeah, I definitely. I think we'll maybe get an opportunity to talk about the random pick strategy later on, but because you were, I guess, not the only one doing that.
I certainly was. I certainly went out of my way to avoid stinkers, but one person in particular did not.
And Fenix, you were also like Ian. You were pretty late in the draft. How did that impact sort of the strategy you had going in?
Yeah, so I was 25th, and I was on the spectrum of random. Most of my prep going in was I actually tried to figure out a way. So I was streaming during it, and I was attempting to have Twitch chat pick for me. The logistics of having a 60-second round and trying to get Twitch chat to respond with the delay were rough. So it was mostly a Twitch chat, give me a rough idea of what you want me to pick, and then kind of talking through that with Twitch chat. And so they gave me some archetypes, and then I went from the archetypes and made my picks from there.
Gonna be honest, it sounds like you all put a lot more thought into this than I did, because I just kind of, as it got to like 3 or 4 picks before me, I'd go like, all right, well, I'm like, what do I think is the best deck that's left here? And I'd usually narrow it down to like 2 or 3 options just in case, one of them got snagged shortly leading up to me.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing that I was planning on was that I could pick up Vannifar in the last round, because no one else has, like, I was pretty confident that almost nobody else really knew what they were doing with that deck super well. And it's a very complicated deck if you don't know what you're doing. So I figured, no one will take it. It actually performs decently well into like certain pod compositions, maybe not full turbo pods, but it's quite good against pods with a lot of interaction, because your combo piece is a creature and you can cast it early. So I was like, well, that's a nice sort of safety pick for round 4. But apart from that, I was just kind of picking what I thought was the best deck that was left. And I thought about sitting down and going and making a big long list, and decided I was too lazy to do that.
I respect that.
Yeah, and we'll be honest, I didn't even look at the Brewers corner before I drafted, so.
See, I spent a lot of time in the Brewers corner, because I was like, if I'm getting picks number 3 and 4, that's probably where the best place is, because I figured the average person would do what you did, Phoenix, and scroll through the database and just kind of be like, oh, that's a really good deck, that's a really good deck. But I knew that the Brewers corner was going to be a place where people would, for example, one of my top picks was from the Brewers corner, which was Timnatana Ad Nauseam. And I was like, this is just a good 4-color Ad Nauseam deck, very aggressive, very fast. And I was very surprised it got picked so early, because I know a lot of people were just kind of unaware that even existed.
I think that was what we took to the first NSL, when we had to make a deck in every like 4.
Oh yeah, yeah.
One deck without each color. We just went like, okay, we didn't want to play like Gitrog. That was a popular one,
right?
We just sort of went like, well, we don't think Blood Pod's super well positioned. What if we just sort of built a farm deck? Built a farm deck in those colors, like mashed together at the time, mad and bad farm.
Yep.
Get the dorks to like
right.
go a little fast. Have that consistent speed, and then like the win cons and breach from red.
It's funny. It's funny you said that, because I did work on a variant of that exact variety before, and I did call it Dad Farm. I had planned on running a whole.
I'm trying to remember what we called that one.
I have a Corval deck called Dad Farm.
It might have been Chad Farm.
Nice.
No, I think Chad Farm was already taken.
I think that was taken by Bruce Tarl and something.
The one
else.
that wasn't a farm deck.
Yes.
Yeah, the one that wasn't a farm deck at all. Yeah.
I feel like we went with two letters before the AD, because it was 2 colors.
Right.
But I don't remember what it was. Yeah, it's definitely a sweet deck. All right, how about we each go through, what was the pick that you were like most happy with? Obviously, the deck you picked first is the deck you thought was best, but the one based on your position in the draft where you were like, nice, I got this, I got this deck this late in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll go in the opposite order and start with, I guess that's me, huh? I went last
It
time.
is you, yeah. Awkward.
I was pretty happy to pick up Kess Storm in I picked it up halfway. I was right in the middle, so halfway through round 2, and like Kess midrange went.
It was me.
A lot before that, like almost a full half round before it, I think. Mm-hmm. And the decks really aren't that different. Like Kess Storm is like Kess midrange with a Mind's Desire in it, so
Yeah.
this is very manageable.
Yeah.
As Nick, it's still a console Nas Breach deck, right? With just like a few sort of spicier includes. And so like I think honestly I think that was like a bit of a pattern. Maybe we can talk about that when we go over the draft more generally, of like very similar decks actually being valued surprisingly differently.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Next up would be Fenix, right?
Yeah. And so for mine, just to go over my general instructions that I had from Twitch chat, my first two picks were pick a Turbo Nas deck and pick a 4-color pile deck. And then my next instruction was pick a good deck. And so when I picked a good deck, I somehow snuck in Zur at 89. And
Yep.
I don't know how that deck made it that far. I think that a lot of people are extremely undervaluing Zur just because partners have been in the meta for so long. Zur still does really dumb, broken things.
I was
Yeah, it's
screaming at chat. I was like, how is Zur still available?
Yeah, and I think it was a very, very short time after that Phoenix actually said Zur.
Right.
yeah. I feel like Zur just fell off the face of the earth because it's like it's an F tier on the sickness tier list.
Yeah.
Like no one's
yeah.
ever been like, man, Zur, what a sweet deck, what a fun,
fun
and
deck
interesting
you
deck.
Yeah.
You know you've offended
so if
like
you're-
7 people right now.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
all
well,
7 Zur players are mad. You're right.
No,
Ian.
like it's a perfectly fine deck, but it's not a deck that people.
It's not sexy, yeah,
I think
yeah.
very few people play it as like a passion project or like this deck's really interesting. You know, maybe it's not quite as good as like doing a similar strategy in a 4-color partner pile, but
Right.
I think it's
but like
saying,
Zur,
generic Thrasios mid-range is like, oh man, that's my baby. It's like, yeah, Thrasios Tymna, you know? It's like, yeah, stock Thrasios Tymna is very good. I don't know if you can ever be like passionate about it.
but also just like Zur doesn't like. There are decks where it's like, would this be better if I just made it into Thrasios Tymna?
Right.
Like, yes, but this is like fun or cool or like it does something really unique and special. So I'm going to do this. But like with Zur, it's like you're playing the commander that people already really don't like and
Yeah.
don't think is interesting because it's been around forever. So
Right.
might as well just upgrade to the best version of that.
Right. It's like
yeah,
it's
you
like
get-
Passiger with a bunch of pub stop mentality surrounding it.
Oh,
like,
you get no political advantage by playing this deck.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. I love that. All right. So Scotty, how about you?
Honestly, I think it was grabbing Dimir Scepter off of Undrafted. Like, I think that's my highlight of the draft. Like, just everybody completely missing on the fact that Blue-Black Scepter is still kind of pretty good. And it just going completely undrafted and me being like, wait a second, I don't have to play Edgar Markov. I could play a good deck.
yeah.
See,
So yeah, I mean that was pretty much the highlight of it for me. Like I think Scepter is still pretty good, and it turns out Consultation is still the most concise win con in the format. So
What?
yeah, I was losing my mind a little bit at not the fact that Dimir Scepter wasn't taken, but just the fact that all the other Dimir decks were.
yeah,
We took Sig
I-
and Nimrus, but like,
yeah. When Sig went before Dimir Scepter, I was like, oh, okay. Well, no one must want to play Dimir Scepter, and I guess that's fine. Or
I have this,
whatever.
I have this novel idea. You play Consult, Nas, and Scepter. I don't think we've ever heard of this before.
We have an outlet for the mana in the command zone. It
Wild.
seems, I don't know, it's not great.
Someone put
but-
this deck on the database.
Yeah, so I think that was like by far the thing I was most blown away by was just being like, hey, can I just have this? And not having to fight for it.
Yeah.
And Ian, how about you? What was your the pick you were happiest
Yeah.
with?
So if anyone ever saw my draft stream, it was by far Mad Farm. I had lost
Mad Farm.
my mind because I round 1 drafted Yidris. I thought it was just like a pretty solid options 4-color pile, very proactive and given the current meta. And Mad Farm in my mind is equatable. Obviously, you lose blue, which is definitely a thing, but there's, cost benefits. Timna, I think, is obviously... I think people are a little hard for Crom right now, and I've even heard people saying Crom is better than Timna, and I just can't agree with that. And I think...
I don't disagree, yeah.
Jessica is really strong as a board control piece. I think it's fantastic that it's also an outlet. So I'm very, very high on Mad Farm, and the fact that got to me during the second round was, like, offensive. I think that deck is really, really strong right now. And with my 5 swaps, I'm pretty happy with what it looks like.
No, it's just outside of the first third of the second round, though, right? So.
Yeah. So I was because of my positioning. Luckily, the picks between my first and second and my third and fourth happened with a relative speed, which was nice.
Yeah.
All right.
What about you?
I guess now we get to do the opposite, right? What was the pick you were either the one that you went with that you were most disappointed with, or the one that you didn't get that you were saddest got away from you? So, Ian.
I like how we are talking about our snake draft and snake drafting our our conversation. I think that was also a pretty surprising. I had a 1-2 punch kind of within the first round. Every primer that I worked on or that I have up on the database was taken within the first round, not including the Brewer's Corner. So I lost Dawnwaker, Thrasios, and Winota within 2 picks in the first round, which I legitimately felt very comfortable that no one was going to play Winota apart from me. And the fact that it was picked round 1 blew my mind. Dawnwaker Thrasios I also was quite surprised by. I think it's really well positioned into this meta, but I was very comfortable being able to pick it up second round. And losing those 2 immediately, there's once again very strong video evidence of me absolutely losing my mind. So I was like, I have no idea what's happening.
Next up is Scotty. What's the one that got away?
You know what? I'll be completely honest. There were a lot of decks that I really, really would have loved to have played. But I think the one that got to me the most was it was Mad Farm. I gotta be honest. I wanted it real bad, and then Ian took it like 10 picks before I did, because I was hoping it would get up to me. I was like, okay, people aren't gonna value Timna Jessica that high. But then, like, after that, I really wanted Tevesh Crom Sire, and I think Ken took it 1 pick before I had to change my entire pool. Like, it was the one that I was gonna get, and then I had to change my pool on my turn, so I took Giganta. And Giganta's good. I think Giganta is good, but I wanted to meme with Sire of Insanity like pretty hard, so.
And Phoenix, how about you?
Mine's really obvious, but I wish Nagila slipped through the first pick, and it would have never made it to me because Pongo's in front of me, but...
All right, yeah, I wish I could have gotten Nagila at pick 25.
Just re-roll the
I don't
draft.
play Nagila. I would have stat picked Nagila.
No, but for a real answer, I do think I was a little bit disappointed with the fact that I've looked at Thrasios Timna Hermit Druid on the database before, and so I knew it was a pretty good deck. I was disappointed with the fact that I didn't like where any of the lists were, even with 5 swaps after I picked it. I ended up in a spot that was pretty good with the list that Scoots made, but I think that there's more than 5 cards I would have liked to switch out of that deck.
Hurtful.
Yeah, that's definitely fair.
Is it? Just seems
I mean,
to me.
obviously, I feel like people are expecting me to say Razakats, but I wasn't disappointed because unlike Phoenix, I knew I was never going to get it.
You were never gonna see it. Yeah.
Like, actual 0% chance. So I think for me, I was kind of hoping in pick 3, there were, at the start of round 3, there were still 3 Tassiger decks left, and I don't know, Sultai value piles with a value engine in the command zone, to me, seem pretty good, you know? And I was like, you know, there's a decent chance that like at least one of these slips through, right? Just there's 3 of them, and people are going to pick like decks they're familiar with or whatever, and then LJ picked one of them round 1, and then Lurker picked one, and it was all very sad. So yeah, that was a little bit disappointing. I had like a vain hope of one of the Grixis decks I like actually making it, like I like more than Gust Storm, actually making it back to me in round 2, but like I wondered if people might sleep on like Malcolm Vile Smasher.
Yeah, no, that went round
Flash
1.
picked it round 1.
Yep.
And it got picked round 1, which I don't necessarily think was wrong. Like I don't think that was like a crazy pick or anything. I just wondered if that might be one that's that's undervalued.
As one of the primers on that list, I thought I was gonna get it too.
Hey.
Oh, in your second round? Yeah.
Yeah.
Jaleva was open. You know, you could have taken that.
All right. Well,
Definitely could have. Certainly a fact that Jaleva was an option.
it's good. So my list is called Pirates, Thieves, Scallywags, and Scoundrels. You think I was gonna pass that up for Jaleva?
That's fair. My Jaleva list is called Medium Bean, though.
That is true. I almost forgot about Medium Bean.
How can you not snag that beautiful deck?
Yeah, I feel like all of my pun names are like funny only to me. But that's fine.
That's fair.
Funny's in the eye of the beholder. And I behold in the deck,
I don't think that's how funny works. But it's okay.
So I guess now we can go over just like our overall feeling about the draft, and I'm imagining we're all decently satisfied, but maybe one of you will surprise me and break down in tears and just lose it about where they are and how scared they are for the rest of the tournament. But yeah, I think I managed to pick pretty solid decks, decks that I also have some experience and comfort with, and decks that I can tweak effectively into like what I'm expecting to see. And I think with the possible exception of my round 3 Calamax pick, which is just a deck that I've enjoyed a lot recently, I think I was picking what I believe to be like more or less one of the best decks available at every other time.
So was Calamax like a passion draft for you?
It was a bit of a passion draft. It was a bit of it's the deck that I've been playing recently, like for fun. And it's a bit of I don't want to have to assemble like 4 decks, pick.
Yeah, I feel that.
I definitely considered taking Zur, but I've just, I don't enjoy sitting. People already like focus me down a little bit.
Yep.
Like I don't need to give them an extra incentive.
Wait, why would anyone focus you down? It's not like you would sit there for 10 turns straight casting Teferi's Time Twist on an Archaeomancer.
Look, sometimes.
I thought we were going to bring up the fact.
All you have is a Teferi's Time Twist, an Orvar, and an Archaeomancer, okay? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought we were going to bring up the fact that he's one of the most winning players in cEDH, but I guess the Time Twist thing.
It's that I'm the worst.
I refuse to pad that ego. No way.
Yeah,
they attack me because I'm the worst. I know. Don't worry. Well, unless Reed's there, then I'm the second worst.
Yeah, true.
Hey.
So, Phoenix, how about you?
Yeah, so
overall impression for your draft.
Fun thing about my draft, because I let Twitch chat pick for me. I have not played Kess or Zur for probably over a year, I would guess.
Nice.
And then, obviously, with my last pick, Hepatra, I've never played the deck. I didn't even know what the deck was, except for the fact that my chat really wanted me to pick it for the 4th pick. And so I picked it. And then Thrasios, Tymna, Hermit Druid, I haven't played this specific list of either. So I basically haven't played any of the decks that I drafted. But I feel really good about the draft. I think that I picked a bunch of really good decks. And
well,
how big was your chat?
I had like 10 people.
Okay.
I'm sure this will be a comfort to you, which is that The bar for playing Hepatra in front of a crowd of people is so low.
God. Oof. Oh no.
I mean, have you seen the Twitter memes with the dodgeball when the God, why can I not remember the name of the team? But it's the bad guy team with the
Cobras.
Globo Gym.
Yeah, the Globo Gym team
yeah.
comes out with the snakes. Yeah, it's just that GIF on Twitter pointed at me all the time. So
Yeah, but there's the story here is that in one of the tier 1 con tournaments, someone in the feature pod was playing Hepatra, and they literally had like the combo on that. They had Hepatra, Blowfly Infestation, and a Blood Artist on the table for like 5 turns, and thought they needed to use their Yawgmoth as a sack outlet, and they couldn't do that because they didn't have enough cards in their deck, and the game ended in a draw because they just never figured out that they straight up had a game-ending combo on the field that they could activate at any time.
Oh, no.
Yep. It was very rough.
I will
I hope
say,
I'll do the Hepatra Discord a little bit better than that, but
given that story, Crossfire Cat, who's a friend of my channel and someone I know pretty well, is a avid Hepatra player, and I think is like undefeated in the NSL with Hepatra. Like it just
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's not all.
I think he had a bit of a coronary over that.
Yeah.
So on to you, Scotty. How was your pseudo random draft? Happy with it?
I felt pretty good about it, honestly. I don't think I did as well as some other people. Certainly LJ managing to snag Belby stacks in the 4th round. Whew.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think I did pretty good. I got a couple of mid-rangey decks and a couple of faster decks, and I was the last person to get a 5-color deck, which I don't know if that is an indication of like deck assessment or like everyone else's deck assessment or my deck assessment. But we'll figure that out. Yeah. But yeah, I think it did pretty good. I got a couple Turbo Nos decks, and in printing them out and testing the decks, they felt comfortable and easy enough. So I think it did pretty well.
Turbonos is like riding a bicycle,
Basically.
Once you do it, you never forget.
Until it's important and you fall off, right?
Exactly. And Ian, how about you?
Yeah, so I going into the draft was like pretty high on Sans White as far as like the Turbo Nos archetype, and I knew that Reed was before me and was like mega hard for Thrasios Vile Turbo, and I knew I wasn't getting that basically to a 100% degree, because we've had conversations in the past couple weeks where he said, yeah, this is the best deck in the format and I'm definitely drafting it. So I was like, okay, fair. So my pursuit was like, okay, let's get the Sans White Turbo deck that's probably going to perform the best. And to me, that was Yidris. Obviously, Cabargas brought it to a first place finish at the second tier 1 con. So obviously the deck can put up numbers. So very happy about that. Pick 1. It's also, as I mentioned before, one of my 2 outdated lists. So I was able to really make it comfortable for me as a pilot, and I've been spending the past like 24 hours really working on the numbers for that deck.
Did you see that deck got updated the Monday after we drafted?
Yeah, I am
hilarious.
so glad I don't have to play a deck with 2 basic islands and 4 colors. That's all I'll say. Wow. But yeah, that was a very narrow miss there. And the second pick, obviously I mentioned before, super enthusiastic about that one. My third pick was Paco and Halden, which Braden accused me of a reverse spite draft after Winota.
Reverse spite draft, yeah. Yep.
But
that was good.
It was either that or like Poly Roger for me, because I think there is a place in the meta right now for like what I would quantify as like teamer anti-stacks. It's basically these like decks that sort of beat up on other mid-range decks and sort of beat up on stacks decks, and they probably get their asses kicked by a turbo deck, but literally everything else in the meta it has like a really solid position in. It, obviously, it's just my opinion, but I think these decks are kind of undervalued. What?
Don't worry, Ian. If your experience is anything like mine, that naivete will wear off in about 6 months.
Fair. But I think there's definitely a space for that archetype, despite my hopeful joy. And the fact that Paco and Holden was undrafted going to the 3rd round, I was like, this is ridiculous. Also, now dated deck, very happy about being able to sort of put my own adjustments on that list.
Absolutely.
Ever since then, I found out that it is considered to be on old tech as far as win conditions, so that part's made me a little nervous. So I'm a little less excited about that than when I first drafted it, but I'm still hoping to prove my concept there with that draft pick. And the last pick, Kodama Sakashima, which was a deck I was kind of in chat. I have Martin or Snuska, who is the primer author of that, someone I know very, very well. And Martin offered to literally give me a private coaching session if I drafted the list. And I was like, you know what? That seems like a pretty solid deal. And a Sultai list being undrafted in the 4th round seems criminal. So
yes, Sultai is pretty good, I've heard.
Interestingly, another deck that I was going to go for that you took from me.
I'm sorry.
Before I could.
Oh, man. I'm sorry, Skid. But all this meandering to say, it felt pretty solid as far as my draft. Callahan tweeted at me saying he thought my draft was pretty solid as well. So I was feeling pretty confident with where it is.
Okay, so I guess this we don't necessarily have to go in order, but for everyone, would you say that you were drafting more towards like what you were familiar with and what you knew, or you were drafting for what you thought was sort of generically the best deck? Based on the way we've been talking about it, it's definitely sounded like we were all trying to play some of the better decks, and if they happen to be familiar, that was a plus. Does anyone disagree with that?
Not at all.
No, yeah, I think that's completely perfect.
For me, I think that statement is pretty accurate. Yeah. Like, if I was drafting familiarity, like, you know, I would have gone for like Hermit Druid or something like that, like a deck that I have a deck list on there for or something. But you know, I was definitely going for a pool of the best possible ones.
I will say it was my intention going into the draft to draft more decks I was familiar with, but as I mentioned, all of my pet projects were gone round 1. So, yeah.
So you had to. I mean, I guess that makes sense, right? If you try and pick the decks you're best with, and then when that doesn't work out, you go, well, I guess I'll try and pick whatever's the best overall because
I have nothing left.
So I think now we can switch focus a little bit away from our specific drafts and our experiences and choices, and talk about sort of our more overall impressions. About the whole draft in general. You know, decks we thought went too early, went too late. People with interesting drafts or really good drafts or just anything like that. So why don't we start with surprising early picks? Was there anything that people thought like were very surprised went as early as it did?
Elsha pick 2.
Elsha pick 2 was honestly one. Najila pick 1 was a little bit surprising to me. But I guess
if he can't play Edric as pick 1, he'll play a deck with Edric in it.
I mean, he could have played Edric as pick 1.
He could have, but that's just not smart. I think he knew that.
Yeah. I mean, I found it kind of funny that like I found like the first 2 picks were both like a little bit surprising, and then like the next several set were
very
were very like what I was expecting. I guess maybe we can sort of go over.
There was a lot of familiarity round 1. I think a lot of people were scared into taking their babies, and ironic that LJ did not do that in the first.
Yeah, the like the person who was being memed on about playing one deck forever was actually the one who switched, and people who obviously are known for their decks but switch it up more didn't. Yeah, so I guess the first 8 decks to go were there's Nagila Tempo as pick 1, followed by El Shatop. Kenrith Midrange, I don't think surprised anyone because
Higher.
that was Hire's pick, and that's Hire's baby. Kai picking Timnacrom Breach, which I think probably most people have the impression that that's the best deck in the format or some approximation of that. So seeing it go at pick 4 was definitely not surprising.
Right.
I really liked Timmy's pick 5 of Opus Thief.
I do too.
I think that was maybe surprising, but just because I didn't expect Timmy to pick it.
Yeah, I think people have, like, there was sort of the old, slower Opus Thief deck fell out of favor a bit, but I think it's been updated to be, it's still slower than Timnacrom Breach.
Right.
But it's definitely playing like, if you look at the cards that are in that deck, there's not a lot that you're unhappy to be playing, and you also you get 5 swaps. It's playing a little bit more of a card quality game than Timnacrom Breach, I think, which is playing a bit more of a speed game. But there's a lot of overlap there.
It's ironic because if you remove some of the synergy pieces in Opus Thief, it's just like, hey, you know, Blue Farm. What if we gave it some card quality? Like that's really the difference between them. You know, it's very interesting to me.
Made it maybe half a turn to a turn slower
Right.
and improve the card quality. Yeah.
I feel like that it's very analogous to what we tried to do when we made the initial Cheese Rush list of okay, what if we went like a little bit slower and just cut like the worst 10 cards that you're just playing because it's super fast.
I agree.
Right.
What if we didn't put, Simian Spirit Guide and Rite of Flame
Reign of
in our
Filth,
deck and played like Necropotence instead?
Yeah. Seems pretty good.
Yeah. Then we had Kodama Sakashima, which was definitely so this was Rebel's pick, and I mentioned we talk about randomness. Rebel was picking
present.
all like random from all the decks. No like categories or subsets.
I believe it was
pure randomness.
Lab Maniac Cam on a number
There's
generator.
Lab Maniac Cameron on random.org. I think.
Yeah. And Kodama Sakashima, it's definitely not. I don't think anyone thinks it's the best deck, but
Could
certainly
be much worse.
as a first pick random, I would have been pretty happy with it.
Yeah, it's honestly, I think it's a good deck. It's one that I keep like put together.
Yeah, like
it's fun and it's strong and
I wouldn't take it at 6, but I would say it's maybe a first round deck.
Yeah, I don't feel bad about it going in the first round, especially if I could possibly draft like, what deck can I say and not sound mean? Cole, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but like if I could possibly get Azami as my first round pick, like I don't feel bad about getting Kodama Sakashima.
Right. I think Kodama Sakashima is one of those decks that I had Rebel not drafted it randomly. I think I would have felt similarly to Paco, where it's like this deck is one of those decks that Stacks decks just can't handle because of the way Kodama works. Yep. And I expected, despite the random pick at number 6, I thought it would have been like an insane round 3 or like a very confident round 2.
I think that would, if I had to guess, I would have guessed that it would have been picked like probably on the earlier side of round 2 for someone looking for a little bit more of an anti-meta deck.
Sure, definitely.
Like maybe pick up like a Turbo Nas deck round 1 and then go for that round 2 and then try and pick like a mid-range deck round 3 and
exactly.
I feel like that probably goes somewhere around pick like 35 to 38 if
I maybe not
if we're not
have it as high as you guys.
Yeah, I think it's even just a little bit better, somewhere in the like 28 to 32.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So you think it should have gone round 1? Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be fair, if my word isn't 100% certain on what should be going in round 1, because I never expected half of these drafts. So
yeah, that's fair.
It's definitely interesting looking at the color identity of the decks from round 1, where it's like
yeah,
like 4 color, 4 color, 4 color, 5 color, 4 color, 4 color, and then there's like Kodama Sakashima, Godo Helm, and then Krark clones.
Yep.
And then
come on, Ken's gotta.
Yeah, that was definitely
Ken,
Ken has a
that was a
brand,
familiarity.
right?
In Ken's
pick, for
defense,
sure.
I don't think Card Clones is wheeling back around. I think that gets taken around 2 before him.
I actually think it would have.
Yeah.
maybe someone in the draft like plays it and I don't know about it, but it's definitely, I think it's a deck that like he's a lot more familiar with than most people would be. And
Apart from literally you, Phoenix, I think. You might be the only one else in this
I
draft.
think there's a couple more players in the draft, but we don't need to get
like
too
I know
into
a
that.
bunch of people like dabbled in the deck. I mean, I even dabbled in the deck.
Right.
But I think like he's very dedicated to that deck, and I would have been interesting to see him try and wheel it, but I guess, you know, obviously if you try and wheel something and it doesn't come back, then especially when it's like your, you know, the deck that you play almost like, you know, more than anything, it's definitely a feel bad. So
I think if you paid any attention to the Twitter chatter, Ken was openly daring people to take that deck.
Yeah.
Like before he did,
for sure.
type of thing. So, because I think he understands that half the time your own Krark is a stacks piece to your game plan, right?
Yeah.
Like as someone who's plays like some Krark Thrasios, half the time you blow yourself out.
Yep.
With the wrong dice roll. So
I just remember playing against a Thrasios Krark deck in Marchesa, and the person lost the flip 3 times in a row on Blazing Volley and just passed the turn. Like I had a Notion Thief, and they were like, "All right,
that.
Blazing Volley." No, lost the flip. Blazing Volley again. Lost the flip. Blazing Volley again.
Yep.
All right, I'm out of red mana. I guess I pass.
While we're on the topic
Like
of
that
Thrasios Krark, I would love to talk about. I know this is a little sidestep here, but I would love to talk about Deke's draft, because genuinely, I was rewatching the draft on the way here, prepping for this podcast, and I was like, Deke's first 2 decks scared.
they're so dumb.
It's Deke
I have
draft
to play
1
Deep
got
twice going first.
Rog Silas Turbo, second draft Rog Timna Turbo, and then picks.
How did Rog Timna go to 46?
Yeah, that's a
heck?
question on its own, right?
I was like, what?
Yeah. But then Deke picks Thrasios Krark, which I know is a pet deck, and then Snoopthar. And I was just like, the disparity between those 4 picks, or at least like the first and second half of his draft, I was very interested in that, because I think
You know Snoopthar was a hate draft, right?
for Timmy,
Yeah, it was a joke for Timmy. I'm 100%
Yikes.
certain it's just a hate draft.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm very much in the minority here, but I didn't necessarily think that picking up like Timna Rograk was like fit super well into, like, obviously it's a good deck, it's a fast deck, but
yeah,
he kind of already has that
with Rog Silas, yeah,
with Rog Silas, and so like picking up a second one of those, you know, you're going first in 3 games.
Yeah.
So playing your turbo deck in those games is great.
Right.
Just feels
think
like you're
Rog
sort of covering a base that's already covered.
Yeah, I think Rog Silas. If I like had to pick one of them to be the home deck, because I don't know if we've expunged on this, but there are games in which everyone knows they will be going first if they're the home player. So everyone kind of has that was definitely a thing for me. Like, for example, Mad Farm is probably going to be my home deck because super aggressive, very fast ad nauseum deck, right? And I think having Rog Silas and Rog Timna, it's very interesting that Rog Silas to me is not the deck I would assume would be the home deck. I would assume it would be the one that goes even faster, which is Rog Timna.
I was actually I was really surprised with Rog Timna. I don't think it's necessarily a bad second pick, right, out of Deke, and I think that there could be that element of like trying to defend against his own division,
Right.
by taking it. But the thing that I'm more surprised about Rog Timna was that Corvault Turbo Nose got taken before it.
That does not surprise me.
Like-
It's a popular
I just-
deck, and it's probably one of the
Yeah.
fastest in the format. Like,
It's popular and fast. I just think Rog Timna was like a little bit faster. I was surprised it didn't go in round 1.
I think a lot of, at least from my understanding, is a lot of the common conversation has been like, yeah, Rog Timna's pretty good, but it's not Mad Farm. And that's kind of, I think that's a common feeling about it. So when you're having these discussions about like, what am I grabbing here? Much like I was talking about with the Timnatana Turbo deck,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things that until you're in a situation like this where you have to play a certain version of something, I don't think it comes up.
That's fair.
Yeah, I've definitely found that like Rograk's Silas I think works super well because it was always very difficult to support a bunch of the creature synergy pieces in Grixis.
Right.
And you were putting in like the really underwhelming
Bad
like,
cards. Yeah.
random beaters and
Yeah.
But like when you're already on the Tymna plan, you want like Hope of Girapur. It's just like a card that you kind of want to play in like a super fast all-in Tymna deck anyways.
Agreed.
Yep.
So like you don't need Rograk to enable Culling the Weak because you're already sort of doing that naturally.
Sure.
I think another interesting early round pick, and it's great because I get to simultaneously roast Ian and Braden, is pick 24? No,
26?
not 24. 26 Winota Stacks.
Yeah.
26 stacks.
Yeah, I've talked to Braden pretty extensively about this because obviously it's been a huge meme ever since it happened. But basically, Braden was like, I want to. He feels the way. I mean, and I think rather correctly that he wanted a stacks deck. He wanted a proactive stacks deck, and he wanted a stacks deck that is very good against other stacks decks, and those are all descriptors I would agree with Winota. I think it's every time I see Winota in another stacks deck in a pod, I'm like, I literally always will be like, oh yeah, I won this pod. Like, it's
Last
just
time I
yeah.
Last time I saw Winota in another stacks deck in a pod, the other stacks deck dropped a Craterhoof and nuked Winota from orbit.
Which, if that doesn't tell you how terrifying Winota is against another stacks deck, I don't know what will.
I think one of the things that Braden had also said about Winota stacks is that it is a stacks deck for people who aren't experienced playing stacks.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
That was kind of his idea of grabbing it, so he doesn't. Or they didn't want to think too hard about playing stacks, but also wanted to play stacks.
Yeah, I think
so.
I could start the argument here that I think that Winota Stacks might be the best stacks deck in the MLC format.
No,
I could maybe make an argument for Kenrith.
I think that the Kenrith stacks deck is.
I think they're comparable. I agree.
I think they're both similarly explosive, but I think Kenrith offers, obviously a wider color identity, and I think that's probably also good.
I think the difference is I think it's a speed thing. I think Winota is a bit faster, but I think Kenrith has a certain inevitability to it that is almost unbeatable in that sense. Where if you get past a certain threshold, and that kind of goes to people need to play Toxic Deluge more, but that's a separate story.
Yeah, I've definitely found. Like, obviously, Pongo plays the Kenrith stacks deck, and certainly, like, there are certain board states where you just look at it and you're like, nothing beats Kenrith on this board state. Like, I'm trying to remove stacks pieces, and they're just being reanimated by Kenrith, and, like, the Kenrith's getting bigger. It's not even, like, he's drawing 2 extra cards a turn. Like, it's definitely not a Thrasios.
It's like a 1/1 counter. Yeah.
I've played a game against Kenrith stacks where it was just like, my own Lavinia is in play, and then or Pongo's Lavinia was in play, then Callahan's Lavinia was also in play, and Pongo went to play Omen Machine and didn't have the amount of lands for it, and was like, I guess I'll just have to wait till I draw a land. And I think we went through 2 orbits of the table, and still, everybody was like, okay, I guess we can't stop this Omen Machine from coming down.
Yeah.
Like, there was no way. It was inevitable. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I think
I wasn't surprised to see Charles take it at pick number 20.
Yeah,
No.
Maybe Winota's like a little bit better into other stacks decks, but I think Kenrith is also a stacks deck that's very good into other stacks decks.
Against
I
stacks
agree.
decks.
I completely agree.
I think they're both kind of the new breed of stacks decks.
Yes, very much so. I think that's a very good analysis there. I think there's...
They've both eschewed the blood pod patterns, and they're just kind of just very good decks overall.
I think it's hard to be a stacks deck right now and go like, yeah, I guess I'm going to shoot myself in the foot too. Like, I just don't, with how clean and linear our win cons are and our aggressive ad nauseum packages are, and decks, now the things are being run like Rushing River. Like, you can't play a single stacks piece and feel comfortable anymore, And I think given that your stacks decks need to evolve to the pace of the game, and I think they both do that. I'm very impressed by all the innovations with Kenra's stacks, and obviously I'm not exactly impartial with Winota, but I think there's a lot of really good stuff there in both of these lists.
I can't. Honestly, I'm just waiting for Braden to flip a Rick into play and for everybody to flip out.
You're just going to hear Coral for the next 20 minutes.
That's what I want. I just want a Rick flipped into play and everybody going, Coral! Speaking of stacks decks that I'm surprised it went early, Lavinia Omen Pool as early as 100. That's crazy.
Yeah, as early as it actually got drafted.
Oh man, that's so good.
When it was drafted, I exclaimed no, and I think some people thought I wanted it, but no, I wanted it undrafted. That's what I wanted.
Still one of my highlights of the live feed, by the way, is that entire interaction.
As somebody who helps write the list, I don't think it's good in this format. I think you're gonna get slapped. You're gonna get slapped by some mid-range decks.
Yeah.
There was a lot of talk about stacks in this meta and how good people thought it was gonna be and how they were taking resilient decks because of how prevalent stacks was gonna be, but I don't think people quite realized that there's a finite amount of stacks decks in the pool to take.
Oh yeah, if I had to characterize the database, I would probably characterize it as mid-range, not stacks.
There's like 70 mid-range lists in this pool. Like
that brings up a fantastic point that I kind of was alluding to earlier with my mention of like the Paco and the Poly Tyrant decks, is that this specific catered meta is much more mid-range than the average cEDH meta at the moment, right? Like you're not going to see multiple Najila decks because there's one. You're not going to see multiple blue farm decks. There's one Rog Silas. There's one Godo. All these decks that you're used to seeing like dozens of copies of are no longer able to be that. And I think people who went into this thinking, oh, this is just going to be the current meta exactly as it is, made choices that probably aren't optimal, because you have to account for the fact that you're going to be playing against, like, there's a lot more. I think what's their fourth Tassiger variants, right? Like that's the nonsense you have to go up against. There's like 5 Thrasios Tymna variants. It's like 5 Thrasios Vile variants. These are all these mid-range grindy piles, and that's not even including like multiple 2-color versions of this nonsense, like the Dimir Scepter list, right?
Dimir Scepter, but even if you go down to like 3-color mid-range decks, there was like what four teamer decks available in the draft pool, and like there was like a dozen Sultai lists and that kind of thing. It's just I don't know. I think if you're asking to get got if you drafted like more than maybe one Turbo Nas list.
I think there were actually there's I think there's a lot more 3-color decks than 4-color decks on the deck. Like,
yes.
I think people think of the meta as like 4-color decks, and there are probably about as many decks in each 4-color category as there are in some of the more popular 3-color categories.
Right.
But there's 10 3-color categories and only 5 4-color categories.
Right. Exactly.
That's just how it's gonna break down. Mm-hmm. And like, even one thing that I particularly like about this format is how easy I think it's going to be for like 2-color decks to compete. Like I have a special place in my heart for 2-color decks. I've run a prized 2-color league before. I really enjoy 2-color decks, and there are so many that, and like
it was great. Everyone got to bring their like interesting commander-centric decks and die to Nas Consult Scepter.
Yeah, everybody.
Or for my example, lose to Sinestro and Tatiova.
That's also fair. But like, I don't know. There are just so many interesting 2-color decks like in the format right now, in this particular format, that I think some people are going to be very, very shocked.
Yeah.
In their middle of season games.
I completely agree.
It'll also be interesting to see how many of these games are decided by, or maybe not decided, but strongly influenced by some level of unfamiliarity with the decks you're playing against.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be huge. Like, one of the things that I'm very interested to see is a lot of the lists on the database that I've seen are just not playing wipes right now. Or and like
You say that, and
one of my qualms with Razakats. Sorry, go ahead.
I have 3 decks with Toxic Deluge in them.
As
one of
you probably should.
my qualms with Razakats is it's not running Swords to Plowshares, right? Like the version on the
DB.
The version on the DB. I'm pretty high on Swords to Plowshares right now, but I had to shore up the mana base, so I didn't put in Swords to Plowshares.
Right.
So I'm like wondering how that's gonna go. You know,
Scotty, no.
Look,
Maybe I need
sometimes you
to
have
put my
cast
list
your
on the
spells.
database so you can play Swords to Plowshares. That's what I'm learning.
Yeah.
I mean, my list plays Swords to Plowshares, my personal list, right?
Yeah.
The one that I keep together. But yeah,
I guess we were initially talking about early picks, but maybe we meandered a little bit.
Can I, while we're talking about early picks, I'd like to point out a first-round pick of Helenium on Esper Farm. Now, for those who have are really in touch, as I know, like the 4 of us here are, that I think this is a new excitement based around, I think, Raccoon and Deke's performance at the last Tier 1 con with their Malcolm Timna Doomsday list, which is a list that sort of popped up out of nowhere, but also literally has a list on the DB. It's like 4th down on this Esper Farm list, but it's there. It is, and it's a really interesting deck, and I think it's a smart snag pretty early on, especially later in the round, very early on.
yeah.
It was definitely a deck I was looking at for one of my earlier picks, just because I think it's once again it's pretty solid, and it placed well with 2 completely individual pilots at a very recent tournament, and I think knowing that sort of information is really interesting going into this draft.
Yeah, I think playing in a couple of Discord metas, I've seen maybe maybe a disproportionate amount of this deck, comparatively to maybe other people.
Yeah,
But, gosh, it's always strong, and it seems like it's so easy to build back from. Even if you get sent to the Stone Age, it always feels like, especially with Malcolm Timna, you're always generating mana and card advantage, and it just is. It's bonkers, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like when Commander Legends was spoiled, people were they got really focused on the Timna Sakashima, 2 Timnas,
yes.
And some people were doing sort of Turbo Nas strategies with it. Some people were doing the more Staxy or the more mid-rangey builds.
Right.
But I think that first of all, Malcolm has flying.
Yeah.
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 Second of all, he's a lot easier to cast, especially really early on. The hands where you just get to go Crypt Malcolm.
Oh, they're insane.
Are
Yeah.
so strong.
Or Jeweled Lotus hold up interaction, Malcolm.
Exactly.
Yep,
Yeah.
Jeweled Lotus Malcolm, have a land open and make a second mana on your next turn.
Yeah.
It's I think plus I think a thing that people miss is that there are other playable pirates in Esper colors, right? With
Stormtamer
Spectral Sailor and Hull
Sailor,
Breacher specifically.
Oh yeah, Hull Breacher.
But Hull Breacher specifically, if we're talking about it, and even Spectral Sailor, which is an outlet for your treasures that you amass over time or whatever. It's pretty easy to make a lot of mana.
I've been saying for a while that I think if we're talking about in a vacuum, what is the best partner pair? I have been saying that Malcolm Timna is the best partner pair because they cover each other's strengths and weaknesses and they add to them pretty strongly. But the strength of Grixis and the strength of Sultai right now are stronger than Esper, and therefore we're not.
Okay,
seeing
so
the pair.
we're saying
I'm saying that's what I'm saying.
ignoring
Those
that
two
color access providers.
right in a vacuum. That I think
Yeah.
those two have the strongest partner combination effects given a cEDH context. I think the decks in Esper don't have the same quality as the Sultai or Grixis list at the moment.
Yeah, that's definitely.
I think that's a fair assessment.
a fair point. So, does anyone else have anything to say about early picks, or should we move on to the late?
No, I'm
picks?
ready for late picks.
Gitrog Dredge at 36.
Yeah, that was really early.
Yeah, that was a little early.
Kalia Razakat, 37.
Actually, I think, I mean, we mentioned Adaptive Sisay at 35, but obviously
Yeah.
that's a personal.
It's a personal
Yeah,
thing
Kelly
with
Razaketh.
Cicada.
Did it go before all the other Mardu lists?
It went before. Yes,
so, yeah.
yes is the answer. Yes.
Now, to be fair, Flash has a lot
It's
of experience
Flash.
on
Oh,
that
yeah.
list from his own
Yeah.
description. So
Yeah, that's fair.
I was
Arami
very-
Spellseeker was also one that
Pretty early,
I was
yeah.
interested to see go as early as it did.
49, yeah. Brawl and Curiosity at 44 really surprised me.
The thing that really got me about this was that Cameron took Brawlin' Curiosity in the second round
Yeah.
and then was upset that Tassiker was gone.
Yes,
by
yes.
round
I
three.
literally was
Like,
listening and I had that same thought today. I thought that was,
I was like,
mind-boggling.
wait a second, hold on.
yeah.
There are 4 of them. You could have taken any one of them.
Right. None of them had been drafted at that point, but Brawl and Curiosity
Yeah.
probably could have gone to round 4. Let's be frank. Like,
I mean, I think like there are a couple people who play Brawl and Curiosity specifically that might have taken it in 3. So if
yeah.
if Cameron was very, very much wanting Brawl and Curiosity, I guess that was his only spot to get it.
Right.
If you wanted
But-
to like reference on how high the entire draft was on Jeskai, Vadrock Storm went undrafted.
Yeah, Vadrox Storm went
but El
undrafted,
Shatop
picked
was
up
number
off
2,
waivers.
so
Yeah, El Shatop was picked number 2, but again, with El Shatop having played with Nick like a pretty good amount, Nick plays Jeskai. Before it was Elsha, it was Kaikar.
yeah.
It's just, I think there was that element. That was a familiarity pick over
Right.
maybe a best deck in the format pick. Even though Elsha is like uniquely positioned, it's pretty strong. But
Jessica Ishai also went relatively early as far as
Jessica Ishai, yeah, Jessica Ishai went pretty early, but I think that is again a case of
someone
bird
liking the
love.
deck. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bird love. Oof.
it's a case of bird
Okay,
love.
I feel like it's a missed opportunity that the deck is called Jessica Ishai and not just Jeskai.
Jeskai,
Yes.
yeah, for sure,
It's literally like
for sure. It's
right there.
for sure.
okay. So late picks. I think we obviously covered Zur at 89 was
Yeah. That was atrocious.
a touch
Yeah.
of disrespect.
yeah.
I'm glad about
I mean, I
it.
think Aminatu at 122.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a deck. We worked with
Francis. Right?
someone, Francis, on that deck.
Yeah.
After playing against him at a GP.
At GP Montreal.
Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
I don't think it's the best thing to be doing in Esper, and I think it's like, it's sometimes a little. I think it confuses people because it feels like you want to go all in on your commander and like do all the fun like flicker things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like a lot of that just kind of isn't good enough.
Agreed.
Yeah, but like realistically, Esper Consult.
But yeah, like it's still an
Pretty
Esper.
good.
It's an Esper
Yeah.
consult deck, and like the commander is actually useful. Like I think, compared to something like Sidisi Brood Tyrant, for example, is like
Yeah.
Sidisi. If you have to cast Sidisi and it's not like specifically to serve as like, oh, I assembled breakfast and like I need the zombie or whatever. Like if you have to cast Sidisi, you're like, this is not good. Whereas Amida 2, like you get a little bit of card selection. You can
Yeah.
imp seal and draw immediately or whatever.
We're just in a world where Yisan got picked 27 slots above Aminatu. And that's, to me, that's offensive.
Yeah, that's fair.
That is a thing that happened.
Yeah, I think the one that I would throw in there is Harvest Animar going at, when did Pongo? Pongo picked it at 115 and then ended up dropping it. But
It's, yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say,
so
it's
I
actually
guess
been
it
released since then.
Ends undrafted. That's
no,
No, it
it's-
was picked back up
I
by
see.
Cicada at in replacement of his 3rd round pick, which was Marath, I think.
Yes.
yeah. I know Marath was dropped. Yeah, that's. I mean, it's definitely a deck that I think has like ebbed and flowed a lot. It
Right.
has some anti-meta strength, particularly. A lot of decks have trouble countering creatures.
Yeah.
all these mid-range decks just get slapped by a creature with protection.
Yeah, but I think in the current meta, it's like in like sort of a more actual meta, not the MLC meta.
Yeah,
Sure.
It's hard to play because it's generally just slower than other fast decks,
and not very interactive.
and it's not interactive enough to like stop them.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
I think it could definitely do very well in a more like mid-rangey
A
in
competent
a meta with
pilot,
like
yeah.
a competent pilot, and then in a meta with more mid-range and stacks.
Yeah. I not to toot my own horn here, but I was very happy with Kodama Silas in the last round. I'm once again aware it's a Brewer's Corner list, but just Kodama's an insanely powerful engine. Silas is bad, and that's literally in the primer.
Yep.
But
It is for color identity only.
it is for color identity only, yeah. And I just think a Sultai list with a lot of really unique play to it being that late in the draft just seems insane. Once again, that was 22 picks, or no, sorry, 12 picks after Yisan. And you know what I mean? Stuff like that. Like, I just
Can
think
I
they're...
ju-
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just saying, I think it's kind of crazy.
I was just gonna say, can I just say how unbelievably happy I am that Silas is terrible? Like,
Yeah.
just
Oh,
yeah.
think
No,
about
yeah,
the
that's fair.
awful world where Silas was good.
Yeah. Even stronger Rograk decks.
Yeah, and then imagine
just
the
can we just
Hymna
not?
Silas
We
nonsense
just play
that
Silas
would've
with
been
everything,
happening
and
before.
there's our Oracle consult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a deck that I was surprised that went as late as it did was Magda, just because it has carried like a lot of hype.
Yeah.
At least in the circles that I travel in, it's carried like a lot of hype, and it's like fast enough. I was surprised to see, because I mean, essentially, right, it's got a very, very strong quasi one card combo with Dockside Extortionist, right? And it has a hard time going to get that, but like I don't know, I think it's plenty fast enough, and I don't know that it's like super resilient, and I don't think card quality is that high, but I think it's like a deck that people are hyped on, and maybe
Right.
I
could have gone higher in the draft.
I think even
I
just
will
to
say
jump
Dex-
off of that, so another one that went undrafted is Crick, and both Crick and Magda I think are really good one color decks that you could pick up late in the draft for a home deck where you're going first. But I think the way that the draft ended up is that everybody who picked in the top 10 or so picked a deck that they're happy playing going first.
Yeah.
I would make an argument that Magda is like a solid tier higher than Crick. And Crick is one of those decks that's very glass cannon, does its thing, or it very much does not. One thing I've noticed when I've been looking at these primers for Magda lately, and I think, Spleen, you mentioned earlier that there's going to be lists just due to this environment that people have no idea what the hell to do against, and that really take advantage of that. And I think Magda's going to be one of them, because many people don't know that the Dockside stuff isn't really the focus of these lists, because that's the obvious combo, right? There's a reason they're all called like Clock something, and this one's Clockside Outlaw, and it's because of these Unwinding Clock synergies where all you need is Magda and one of these artifact creature dorks, and they go and make infinite treasures, right? And
Universal Automaton.
yeah, Universal Automaton being the premier version of that at only a single mana, right? So if you get treasures independently of that, you have a Universal Automaton. You've been playing a bunch of dumb dwarves this whole time, just getting a little bit of casual value. You play an Automaton, you get your Clock of Omens, and then you've won the game. And that's
the other
it.
obnoxious thing that
Yeah.
The other obnoxious thing that it leverages is like easy to crew vehicles, like Smuggler's Copter, because you can crew multiple crew it and then make treasures and then go off, and people are not often removing a Smuggler's Copter or whatever, and I'm certainly not removing like a 7 dwarves almost ever.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting you mentioned, I think, like, Magda, to an extent, yes, people don't know what to do about it, but I feel like the uncertainty is, like, it almost makes it worse, because I just I feel like people will have a tendency to assume that you just can't let them activate Magda.
Really, I
Yeah.
haven't been in that circumstance yet, so I yeah.
I mean, I understand it. Like, I understand, especially in these decks that seem to be commander centric. Like, I think in people's first time seeing them, they will just remove the commander like quite often, just to not have to deal with the deck going off. Possibly.
I think it's hard when your commander is at 2 mana. Like we see that with Kinnan a lot, right?
Yeah. For sure. But I don't know. I think I think it's a deck that will. I think Nick is a competent pilot, and I think it's a deck that'll do. I think it's a deck that will sneak under the radar. Honestly,
Agreed, very much so.
So, I'm excited to see it go off. And like as far as like other like super late picks, I'm honestly surprised that Armix Crom went as late as it did, being a Grixis deck at pick 79. Like that was
So yeah, I think that's a kind of a good point. It's listed here as Armix Crom -BC. Do you guys think
Brewers
that
Corner.
like having the Brewers Corner tag influenced when these decks were
Yes.
picked?
100%.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. Because I think that there's like I think people are associating Brewer's Corner with like a negative
Yeah.
stigma. And I don't think people understand how the database currently works.
Yeah. Agreed.
Where these new decks that are coming out with like in this case this is a partner from Commander Legends. So the database right now they're definitely staging like new decks that revolve around new things into the Brewer's Corner first, and then kind of quote unquote promoting them to the main database, right? I think people are not like, if you look at round 3, just look at all those -BCs from round 3. Like I think like even in my case, I managed to get a 5-color turbo ad nos deck in round 3 because it had BC next to it, right?
Yeah.
Like I think there was definitely some negative perception that didn't need to be there.
I think
Yeah,
not only is
I
there
think-
negative. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think that like people, so you know, people, it's like, oh, the BC decks are decks that like we're not sure where they're gonna wind up yet. You know, like they haven't been around a long time. They don't have sort of a consistent result to offer. But I think that like given how recently the Brewers Corner was actually implemented, like it was only a few months ago.
Yeah.
A huge number of the decks on the database like never had to pass through Brewers Corner and are like maybe a little bit out of date.
Yeah.
So I could see like a couple of years from now, you know, like Brewers Corner's decks generally being like less good than not Brewers Corner's decks, as more and more of the database is like decks that were
Filtered
quote unquote promoted from Brewers Corner.
Right.
But a lot of those decks were just kind of grandfathered in, and
Yeah.
and so like I think
I never had to go through Brewer's Corner,
Yeah.
right? To get on, like it was either you weren't on or you were on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like for example, Rog Silas up until this update that just happened
Until this
was on the
update.
Brewers Corner.
Yeah.
Yep. Malcolm
Yeah.
Bile as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was some prejudice there, but that's okay.
I not only do I think it's like prejudice, but I believe ignorance as well. I think legitimately people just are they see these decks and they're like, okay, this is the database, and then they don't realize that there is an entire subsection of like, here's what new innovations are being created every single day. I legitimately think Brewers Corner to some people is like, yeah, we'll think about it later. And I don't, as Phoenix was saying, like, and Phoenix, I know you're a competent player and I know you play a lot, but you even said like your instinct was not even to check the Brewers Corner, right?
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I wouldn't,
feel
yeah. Sorry.
I feel like it's you know, there's like competitive decks, and then there's 3 other things that in your mind are like, oh well, I guess those are not competitive decks, you know, like meme decks and outdated decks and Brewers Corner, they all go together, and then there's the competitive decks.
And you're like, oh wait a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess to that point, like, I think the Brewers Corner, like in this just had like a bunch of extremely like very good decks, and I see like the trend overall being that the people that got these decks, it's kind of like an if you know you know situation. I think like Joan Jeska at 120, like that's a fun deck, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I don't think it's. I think once again it's going to be a situation where the performance of the deck is not. It does not correlate to the position at which it was drafted.
That's super valid.
Yeah, I think like especially just because of how like the database cycles have worked, a lot of what's on the Brewers Corner is like all of the like not obviously slam dunks but still pretty good Commander Legends partner pairings.
Yeah.
Which is just like you're looking at like a 3-color deck with 2 commanders, usually in like an established archetype, is such a high floor that like a lot of these decks are like is Armix Crom as good as like something else you can partner with Crom? You know what? Probably not, but like it's still a Grixis deck. You can get rid of like some problematic stacks pieces with Armix,
like,
and
it almost becomes
and
like a Jeska.
and you have Crom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you're playing Nadir Ludovic or whatever. These are decks that like, these are decks that like make sense. They're obviously good enough to be on the database.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
I should have put Thrasios Nadir on the database so I could have picked it round 3. Would have been so hot.
Honestly,
You should have.
I think it's a really strong deck. I enjoy it.
I guess also late. I guess it's not exactly a late pick. I don't think it was necessarily wrong. I was surprised that KCI Tashar ended undrafted.
I was not.
I think that's a deck that I personally don't think is particularly good. Especially, I guess maybe it was because people were thinking there was just going to be a ton of stacks, and that's a deck that struggles against pretty much all
anything.
forms of stacks.
All stacks pieces.
Interaction of any
Any
kind.
stacks or interaction.
But I think it's a deck that like because it has like an effective following and advocacy group. I think like perception of that deck is actually that it's a pretty good deck. So I was a little surprised that no one.
I actually wanted to touch on that a little bit, and because well, now that you mentioned it, I want to touch on it because I feel like the majority of the pool in this particular event is North American. And I think that KCI Tesher's kind of strongest following is very much outside of North America. It's only
agree, yeah.
I've only seen it advocated for in like the Brazilian circuit or like Europe. Those are those are the communities that play it. It's like
and also like everyone in the 99.
Say that again.
I said, and also like everyone associated with the 99.
Yeah. But I think like it's much the same reason that Marwyn Elfball went like much later than Selvala Brostorm, right? Like these are I mean, that's probably not like the best example, but
I was gonna say I honestly
like,
I think Teshar is leagues better than Marwyn, but that's
well, I'm just saying like I think decks like Marwyn and Teshar are on the database largely because of a non-American population that plays them a lot.
Yeah.
Actually, thinking about it, I probably should have mentioned this at the time. I think Brostorm was also that went a lot earlier than I would have guessed.
Higher.
It went earlier than you would have guessed, but that's because it's the first cEDH deck Hire ever played.
Yes, exactly.
He was like very open about that.
I guess that's like another thing with this whole Selvala versus Marwyn thing is that when Selvala was new, it was much better than Marwyn was when Marwyn was new.
Right.
So a lot of people like there were people who starting out built Selvala, like a lot of them.
Yeah.
Because it was, first of all, it budgeted quite well, and then it was quite good. It was sort of it had a linear game plan. So there's a lot of people who started on Selvala and not a lot of people who started on Marwyn. And so I feel like there's a little bit of a stickiness to the perceptions around the deck that
Valid. Yeah.
because they're not. I don't think they're actually that different in terms of power level.
While we're on the topic of late picks, 125 Abzan Razaketh. I think that was kind of a steal. And for the very reason of being, we've sort of the point you brought up earlier, right? Is that like, yeah, Razakats got drafted. What, Scoots, did you grab it? 12th?
Number 10.
10.
10 overall.
10 overall, right? And here we have a almost strictly worse version of this deck, but still a
But also
very
not bad.
strong archetype. Still using Timna, if I'm correct, because it's not the Nakarianic version.
Yeah, it's Timna something
Timna
else.
Sidar.
I honestly, you said that.
Sidar? Yeah.
You said that was a bit of a steal. I feel like that was almost a bit of a scam because it's like Nikara and Yannick. I don't want to play.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
That was honestly like it said Nikara Yannick the whole time, and I was thinking about. I will be completely honest in that I was thinking about taking it, like it was in that same pool as kind of like bad farm for me,
Right.
in the second round,
Right.
But it said Nikara and Yannick, and I didn't want Yannick and Nikara.
That's
like,
super valid. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that could be a lot of reason why it fell. That's fair.
That's actually a really good point. Because I saw Nakari and Yannick as well, and I think having
Yeah.
if I'd saw because I was very high on Timna Kodama, that was
Yeah.
what I wanted round 3, if I had my
I'm so glad.
preference. Yeah, I love TK, but I think if I had seen Timna Sidar, that probably would have been my backup plan as opposed to Paco.
And then I think my last one, the late picks, was we haven't talked about how Tim Natana Snoop just didn't get drafted.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
4-color pile.
I mean, it's just because it was, it's a 4-color pile, and it's like a deck that I know at least the author twice is like super
Yeah.
proficient with, and it's a deck that I have lost to a fair number of times, right? And it also has the crazy unmodified exception to it, where you pretty much just get to build it from the ground up, right?
Unfortunately,
So
it does have the word Snoop in the title, so there's one package you can't really cut.
you do have to play conspicuous Snoop, which is a little
And Timna and Tana, but
iffy, but yeah.
Maybe this is a hot take. I don't think Sans blue decks are 4-color piles. Like, not in the complementary sense that pretty much
I guess
every
that's-
4-color combination has associated with it.
That's a valid stance. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's actually a valid.
I think there's a reason you see Blood Pod associated with those colors, right? Or like Stacks decks, and I think it's because when you remove blue, you're sort of this. I think you're implied to do two things. It's either A, and as we saw here with Tim Natana Turbo, right? You're implied to be playing into the fact that you have black, or B, you're sort of now being forced into the fact that you have white. And one of the reasons that I know personally I'm really low on Tim Natana Snoop is the fact that you can't abuse white because Snoop doesn't really work with it really well. And you can't abuse black because it's way too slow to use the black part of that deck. And I think that's sort of my low point in that deck. And I think the benefit of that deck is you're playing a lot of creature-based win cons, which is obviously very good. But you don't get to use black and you don't get to use white, so you're just kind of drifting in the ether playing Snoop.
I feel like the rebuild of that deck is going to be Jund with a white splash, right? Like, I think we'll see. I think we'll see the Adnos plan. I think we'll see, like, the Culling the Weak Stitchers type breach line,
Right.
and I wonder what else we'll see. I think it's probably going to be mostly Golgari minus like breach and Dockside, and maybe like.
Well, I think the
rituals,
issue is if you get too far out of red, then Snoop costing double red
Is a problem.
And like,
yeah.
And like the fact that sometimes you just have to naturally find your Kiki combo and it costs triple red becomes
Yeah.
more and more of a problem.
Yeah.
So like I think it's an interesting tightrope to try and walk of like cutting as much red as you can from the deck without cutting so much that it like then Snoop is just like an overstress on your mana base.
Yeah.
That doesn't justify itself.
Yeah, I think that's totally legitimate. But I also think that there's like the case to be made that kind of like Dockside and Red Rituals play pretty well into both the ad nause plan and the getting a triple red pips on the board. So
Fair. Rituals, red, makes sense.
yeah.
All right. I guess the last sort of thing to talk about is there any rather than looking at decks, looking at the drafters? So are there any drafters or drafts that people want to highlight? Think they either were just interesting or very good or maybe not so good, although let's be nice.
Yeah. I have to say, number one, I love that LJ is just playing 3 versions of Edric. We have number 1 pick, Najila, which is Warrior Edric. Number 2 pick, Edric, which is Edric. Card Edric. Tasigur, which as a YouTube commenter called Undeadric.
Undeadric?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And round 4 was my baby Belby, which is Mana Edric. So LJ, really keeping to the LJ style.
I've also seen I've also played against a deck called Dredric before.
Yeah.
Which is a Tasigur deck that leverages Edric.
That's hilarious.
Which was pretty good. I think that is a very notable draft, certainly.
I have some hot.
I was
some hot takes that I don't think I've seen anybody say that these two have had good drafts. So I think I don't know if I know for sure who I would rank number 1, but I think that my top 2 drafts are Sick Robot and Snacks, actually, for different reasons for each of them. So for me, Sick Robot drafted 3 really good, hard to interact with decks, and then Cole. And then
Yeah.
I think Snacks drafted 4 decks that are all probably in the top half of power level of decks in the database. None of them are like home runs, but all of them are up there, I think, and they're all solid.
You know what?
decks.
I'll take it.
Saying that about Muldrotha midrange is just trying to get Morgan
I'm
of
super
Valor
fine with
here.
Muldrotha. I don't know how we feel about 3rd pick Toothy Storm being called anything even close to the top half of our format.
I'm higher on Toothy Storm than most people are, but
I mean,
That's fair.
I think Muldrotha midrange is definitely better than it was now that I finally, cracked and abandoned my crusade and put Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation in the deck. So, I mean, it is still a Sultai consult deck, which definitely has a very high floor. But yeah, Toothy Storm is like an interesting deck. It's interesting. Sorry, going back to 6 draft. I think that Viral's Hulk it's actually not that hard to interact with.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's a little bit of a shit test deck. Like, you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think people too often
Don't.
they just allow like something they shouldn't. And you go like, oh,
And
if you'd
6
just
playing,
done
right?
X, you would have been fine. And this is obviously a deck that he knows inside and out,
Yeah.
upside down and backwards.
I mean, he is the Hulk player of our format. I think it's not hard to say. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
and then not to speak down on 5-Color Storm. 5-Color Storm is a good deck. It's just the most boring deck maybe on the entire database.
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I think
However, I
actually,
remember it. Sorry.
I was just going to say that I think Pongo's draft is also like very good.
Yeah.
I think that Tatiova Turns is a deck that
Very strong pick 3. Very strong.
it definitely has some very strong matchups. And then getting a 4-color deck in the last round is pretty solid. I actually Kenrick, like, I think his first 2 picks didn't like wow me, though they're obviously like fine decks. Obviously I've been pretty vocal about where I come down on the whole Ikrakram versus Thrasios Vial debate.
Right.
But like, I mean, you've got a Kenrith deck that gets to play. I mean, it's Hermit Druid, but you're still like Breach Nos Consult, and then I think his third and fourth picks were definitely very, very strong.
I want to talk about Kai. I think I hadn't really realized, but I am not disinterested in a single deck that Kai drafted. And we have Tymna Breach, which is arguably one of the best decks in the entire format. We have Tasigur Turbo, which can only be so bad. Abzan Kodama, which as I mentioned, I think it's another one of those. Based on our Winota 5-color Kenrith conversations, I believe Abzan Kodama to me strikes a very similar vein of playing stacks, but Kodama just being such an overwhelming force that it can really break a lot of ideas on what is and isn't, acceptable in a stacks deck. And then the Abzan Razaketh deck that we just had a whole conversation about it, right? So I just think that's 4 solid hitters. I'm quite impressed with Kai's lineup, and I didn't even really realize that until our conversation right now.
I think Kai's plan was to go like TK Breach and then 3 Abzan decks, and the fact that I ended up taking bad farm threw off his plan in my conversations with Kai. That's after hilarious. The fact. Yeah. One draft that I thought was like actually like pretty incredible was Josh going at pick number 24. He pulled up Dawnwaker, which as I understand is a deck that he's like very comfortable with, and it's like it's a deck that wins by crushing advantage and should do pretty well in mid-rangey pods. Teamer Polytyrant we've already talked about. It's one of those kind of mold breaking decks where it doesn't do anything particularly fast if it doesn't have to. But it can win with like Divergent into like Rograk into Tidespout Tyrant and draw your deck. It's very equipped to do that kind of thing. TK Bearweaver was like one of those later picks. It's another one of those like Opus Thief type decks, I think. Where
no. Have you looked at that deck?
Has it changed?
No, but you're describing it as an Opus Thief type deck, and there's an Elish Norn in there, so
I hadn't finished my sentence actually, but it's one of those decks that plays like so it plays like some weird cards, but it can. I guess what I mean by one of those Opus Thief type picks here is that it can with 5 swaps like play some weird cards, but also play incredibly concise win cons and take advantage of like Grixis good stuff. Is what the end of my sentence was going to be, but I think it's like it's a fine deck, I guess is what I'm saying. It is at worst Crom Tymna with some decent like tempo pieces, right?
Yeah.
I think that those pieces like do a lot more to interfere with the game plan typically associated with Tymna Crom than maybe you're like then.
Well, I'm saying like if your cuts are like Lavinia, Linvala, Samurai of the Pale Curtain, like Elish Norn, and maybe Consecrated Sphinx, right? You make those cuts. Mind Sensor, Odds Maker, those are a little weird.
I would be hesitant to remove Lavinia, but I think that's more pedantic than anything else.
I mean, I guess I'm sort of thinking like, are you allowed to pick a deck called Bear Weaver and cut 5 hate bears from it? Like, I don't know if.
Oh, that's true. There is that format of there is that spirit of the format thing.
Yeah.
Needs to be concerned with, and you know what? I didn't think about it in that context, so I think that's fair. But then I also think that like Yuriko midrange is a base Dimir deck that plays Consultation to win and has like some other interesting lines that it can take.
My main critique of Josh's draft is that I think everyone has a home deck, but Josh.
Josh
is definitely playing.
Charles also doesn't have a home deck.
Well, sure, but Charles has a home deck.
He does?
Charles's home deck is a turn 1 Trinisphere. That's what Charles's home deck is.
Grand Arbiter. Charles's home deck is Grand Arbiter. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
That's his
Mulligan to
Shift
Lotus
Lash deck. Yeah.
Okay.
Grand Arbiter turn 1, get Shift Lash, win the game.
All right.
But yeah, I would say none of these decks are particularly suited for just being able to really abuse the fact that they're going turn one. Maybe Polytyrant.
They're going first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Actually, I guess I don't think any of my decks are particularly like home decks either.
Yeah, but
Guess
like
Storm
you
is
need any
fine.
extra home cooking. By the way, you're playing Kess Storm. I don't know if you like. We've already been over that it's not that different from Kess midrange, which is in and of itself a
Yeah, I was gonna
slight
say Kess
misnomer
Storm
being called a
seems
mid-range deck. So
Yeah, I'm not saying like I don't have anything good to play going first. I'm just
Yeah.
saying like I don't think any of these decks are like super, oh, this is the obvious like super explosive
Sure.
first deck. Like I think playing Kess is like compared to other Grixis decks, playing Kess is already kind of a nod towards like, okay, maybe we're gonna be just a little bit more like 2 degrees more chill than
yeah, that's fair.
other options.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else they wanna add overall or about any specific topic?
I just want to say, this was one of the most fun I've had just doing cEDH Magic stuff lately. Really fun draft format. I loved being able to stream it. Super great time, obviously. Can't thank Callahan in person because Callahan isn't here right now, but super fun, unique way to play the format, and I'm looking forward to these games and to see how this all plays out.
Heck
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to lose to Rog Silas twice.
Yeah, fair.
Well, just don't tap out turn 1. That's all you have to do.
I actually, if we're talking about losing to Rog Silas twice, there was an interesting thing said on Twitter today where someone said that they would essentially just attempt to politic the pod into screwing over the Turbo Nos player going first, so that they could all possibly win on the axis that they wanted to play on. And I thought that was interesting, and I was wondering what y'all thought about that kind of thing in this environment.
I think that it's like I think that the incentive is too strong for everyone but the last player playing blue
Yeah.
to just try and pass the buck.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
if I'm going second, like, so okay, Deke's going first. He has some explosive start, and it looks like he's lining up for a turn 2. And I just go like, well, I'm gonna develop my mana or launch this tutor or whatever because the person after me playing blue is gonna they'll handle it. And then either they won't have 1 mana interaction and they won't actually be able to stop it, or they'll look at the board and be like, well, even if he's not winning here, if I pass my turn doing nothing, then I'm so far behind that like other people are going to start winning, and so I think that like it's definitely it's going to be hard to actually sell that idea because people don't have to make you don't make your decisions at the same time, right?
Yeah, I think even though you know who's going first, it doesn't change anything about the dynamics of how a table interacts with that person going first, even if we didn't know that they were going first before the game.
I think it's
Yeah.
it's one of those things where people won't tap out and be greedy. People won't play spells into Wandering Archaic. Like people will pay for the Rhystic study.
Yes, they
I think
will.
it's a lot of nonsense when it comes to the fact that
Like a lot of trust into people that you
Yeah.
can't necessarily trust.
yeah.
The one thing that will be interesting to see is like I could see, for example, mulliganing aggressively for like free interaction, and then like if everyone does that, then there's a decent chance that you can actually just get the stop off on turn 2. And like everyone knowing that your game plan was going first and playing Turbo Nos could definitely like influence that.
I think it's just once again just a very altruistic idea that I don't know will be actualized.
Yeah, that's
Fair.
fair.
Or just whoever's going second, just hard mulligans for Mystic Remora. It's like, well, he's gonna go off on turn 2. Might as well, assuming he gets.
You know
stopped
what? I gotta
somehow.
say, I like that plan a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't be altruistic. You just set yourself up to profit off of everyone's selfishness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
All right.
All right. Well, this was good.
Yeah. Well, that about wraps things up for us here today. An extra thanks to Ian for joining us for this. Do you have anything you want to plug for us?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I am Ian over at ComedIan MTG. I do YouTube content, some gameplay stuff, analyzing gameplay on a really personal one-on-one basis, analyzing the plays, thought processes behind them. Do a lot of deck stuff. I'm known in the community for brews such as Winota, Dawnmaker Thrasio, Spellbee, things of that nature. So I'm always looking to brew in the sort of unique spaces in the format. So if you're interested in content like that, come check out the channel.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to have all those links in the description for you as well. Thanks again to Ian, and just a quick reminder for everyone that you can follow us on Twitter at SculptyBoys, or you can find a direct link in our link tree in the description below. And we would also like to give an extra thanks to all of our patrons who help keep the lights on. If you too would like to become a patron, you can head on over to patreon.com/themindSculptors or check out the link in the description. Thanks again for joining us, and from all of us here at The Mind Sculptors, I'm Spleenface, and we'll see you next time.